right, everybody. All right. Coming down here now for our interview with Larry Hamm. And as you can see, we got 2 minutes. We're counting down. And just want to invite you to this discussion. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. Share this with somebody, invite somebody else online. We're going to interview an outstanding human rights and civil rights leader in the state of New Jersey, Larry Hamm. So get on board, little children, get on board. Come on to the KOTO website and join us as we share in this interview. We're glad Larry's here with us. And so I'm doing a Facebook Live while I'm talking here just to get people lined up, revved up, and ready to go. We're ready to go. We got Larry Hamm here with us, everybody. You don't want to miss today. You don't want to miss today, right? This week, we had Chaplain Barry Black, Senate Chaplain of the United States Senate with us. We had Dr. Wayne Greaves. Chaplain Black talked about what happened on the 6th from his personal frontline experience and how God delivered him. If you haven't seen that, you need to check that out on our website. If you haven't seen Dr. Wayne Greaves, Dr. Greaves talked about debunking the COVID myths. Dr. Wayne Greaves is a renowned scientist and physician and researcher who, he brought the goods last week. And then we have Larry Hamm today. Larry Hamm is a noted activist in the state of New Jersey, all over the United States, as a man who has been standing for the disenfranchised, for the poor and the needy for a long time. And so we're delighted to have him. So I'm doing two things. I'm doing the Facebook Live promo. I'm inviting you on to the church website to check us out, all right? You don't want to miss this, everybody. So get on to our church website and our church Facebook page as we get ready. We get ready to go. All right. So Larry, my friend, my brother, we are absolutely delighted to have you with us at KOTO today, Church of the Oranges. We're excited, man, that you could be with us. For those who don't know who he is, let me just give you a brief synopsis. I can't give you the whole CV. We don't have time for the whole CV. But I love this man of God because although he doesn't wear the badge of pastor or reverend or bishop, he is a bishop of the streets. He's been fighting this battle for many, many years. His CV depicts him, and rightly so, as a human and civil rights activist, a humanitarian, a public speaker, and I would say a passionate, articulate public speaker. He's a relentless advocate for African Americans and African American issues and concerns. He's a graduate. We should know he's a graduate of Princeton University, the renowned Princeton University, which means you can't go to Princeton and come out and be stupid. You gotta have some gray matter, some operational gray matter to come out of Princeton. While at Princeton, he led the fight for freedom in South Africa, for the fight against the apartheid government in South Africa, and challenged Princeton University to disassociate themselves from investment in South Africa. He is the founder of POP, People's Organization for Progress. You should also know that Larry most recently ran in the Democratic primary for senator of the state of New Jersey. He lost to Cory Booker. But next time he's not going to lose. We declare that. And so, Larry, we love you, man. We thank God for what you bring to the table. As I said to everybody a minute ago, we're bringing different people. Next week, we're going to have one of the most brilliant principals in the state of New Jersey, fighting the fight for young people, a woman who came from homelessness, a single mother who was homeless. You're going to hear her testimony on next week. And so you don't want to miss that. But over and over again, we're just excited to have these wonderful, gifted, anointed people talk to us during Black History Month. And it is our privilege, our pleasure to have my brother, my friend, Larry Hamm. I marched with him a couple of months back. He gave me the bullhorn and had said a few words. And, you know, we were all very passionate during that George Floyd, you know, the March for Justice for George Floyd. And I stood with Larry on many of those occasions. And I want you to know I love you, Larry. I admire you. I appreciate your tenacity and your longevity. It's not that you've done this 1 year or 2 years and then quit. You've been fighting this fight for 30 years. At 17, being elected 50. Oh, my Lord.
50 years.
Oh, my Lord.
That's an old resume. That's an old resume you have. It's really 50 years.
50 years, Larry Hamm. 50 years. And then, Larry, if you don't mind, when you finish talking, I want to give some of the people an opportunity to, you know, maybe ask some questions of you.
Yes.
I think it'd be good for you to kind of interact and have a dialogue with folks who may have some questions for you. But Larry, I want to give you the floor, my friend. Welcome to the Church of the Oranges, to our Black History Month focus afternoon program. God bless you. Welcome, Larry Hamm. Ladies and gentlemen, type in the chat. Welcome. We're glad to have you. Put your hands together. Give me some hands up. Give me something as we say welcome to Larry Hamm. God bless you, Larry.
Thank you, Pastor. God bless you. God bless everybody in the Church of the Oranges. And I'm so glad to be here with you this afternoon to talk a little bit about Black history. I'm going to try not to talk long so that we can have some dialogue, some questions and answers. And I just want to say to you, Reverend Dr. Stoddart, thank you for being a pastor who preaches the gospel of Jesus as a gospel of liberation.
Amen.
You are a pastor that has been with us on the front line in the struggle for justice. As many people know, George Floyd was suffocated to death by Officer Derek Chauvin last summer. And that precipitated the biggest wave of protest in the United States since the 1960s. In fact, they say that experts say that more people participated in demonstrations against police brutality and demanding justice for George Floyd and others, such as Sister Breonna Taylor, than ever before in the United States. Millions of people in just that short period from basically the 30th of May through, let's say, August. There were literally tens of thousands of demonstrations in which millions upon millions of people participated. And I'm an eyewitness to this, not only because People's Organization for Progress had demonstrations here, but I was invited to speak at demonstrations all over this state. And Reverend, there were demonstrations in towns that if you had said to me there would be a demonstration against police brutality in that town, I would say you lying. Them people not going to demonstrate. There were towns that literally almost have no Black people in them, but yet the spirit of justice gripped the people. And when the spirit of justice grips the people, they have no other choice but to move for justice. And this was evident all over New Jersey, from big towns to little towns, from hamlets to cities. There were protests and demonstrations. One of the largest demonstrations the People's Organization for Progress ever had was the demonstration that we called for George Floyd on May the 30th. And to tell you the truth, I had expected only a couple of hundred people to show up. And Reverend, you know, we always calling for the people, but the people showed up and it scared me to death.
Yeah.
Because I said, Lord, I need you today.
What we gonna do now, Lord?
We called for the people and they showed up. The New York Times reported 12,000. You know, other papers reported 5,000. It was a whole lot of people.
It was.
We couldn't see the end of the crowd. We marched all over downtown Newark, and it was wonderful. And it was wonderful because so many young people participated in that demonstration. And Reverend, we as a people don't have a future unless our young people are involved in the struggle for justice. And I'm so proud of all the young people, black, white, red, yellow, brown, who came out and marched for justice and marched against police brutality. I'm telling you again, Reverend, I want to thank you because you were not just there one time, you were there a number of times with us. You came out. Now, you and I haven't known each other for so long, but you responded to the call when others that I have known for years did not respond to the call. And I say to the people of the Church of the Oranges that you are blessed to have a pastor who is not afraid to speak truth to power, who speaks in the tradition of the prophets of Ezekiel and Amos, who's not afraid to bring the word of the Lord to chastise those in high places who do wickedness to the people, who hurt the poor. Isn't this what the Bible says? To do justice by the poor, by the widow, and by the orphan.
Yes, sir.
The problem is we don't have enough pastors today who are willing to come out of the church and come into the streets as Jesus did. Jesus, according to the Gospels, was not in the synagogue that much. He was more in the streets and the highways and the byways than he was in the temple. He was there from time to time. And you know, one time, Reverend, he went into the temple, and what did he do? He had to drive out the money changers.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
They said he overturned the tables
That's right.
of the money changers because they were dealing in wickedness. They used unjust weights. Isn't that what the Bible
That's
says?
right. That's
They
right.
were cheating the people. You know, Jesus said, "You've taken my Father's house and turned it into a den of thieves."
That's right.
And we need prophets. We need prophets like John the Baptist. We need prophets who are not scared to speak truth to power. And Reverend, you are in that tradition.
Praise God.
And I pray that you will stay in that tradition,
Yes,
because
sir.
this is what our people need today. And you asked me to come today to say a few words about Black history and about breaking the chains of history. And I want to say to all who are looking and to all who are listening to this broadcast today that history is alive. I would do you an injustice if I came to you with a list of famous Black people, or I came to you with a list of famous Black inventors. You can go and get that yourself. You don't need me. I feel that my job is to try to make sense of our history and draw from it the lessons that we can use today. And one of those lessons is that history is alive. I don't know how many people have been following the impeachment proceedings. Reverend, those proceedings just concluded a few minutes ago, maybe about an hour ago. The Senate took the vote. And although a majority of the senators voted to convict, because he's been impeached, he was impeached by the House. And Donald J. Trump is the only president in the history of the United States to be impeached twice in the same term, not even in a different term. He's impeached twice. And they took the vote today, and a majority of senators voted in favor. It was 57 to 43. But to convict, they needed 2/3 majority of the 100-member Senate, and that would have been 67. So although a majority voted to convict, it was not the supermajority that was needed to actually bring about a conviction. But why do I raise this within the context of breaking the chains and Black History Month? Because if you listen to these proceedings, Our history came up again and again and again. Reverend, today and yesterday, who was one of the people that both sides, this is how you know you have left a legacy. When your legacy in the fight for justice is so powerful that both sides of the argument have to recognize it. They had raised the name of Julian Bond. You know that name, don't you, Reverend? Julian Bond was a civil rights activist.
Yes.
He was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC.
Yes.
And he went from, as a very young man, still in his early 20s, he went from a activist as a member of SNCC, participating in the protests, the demonstrations, the sit-ins, the freedom rides. He ran for the state assembly in Georgia.
Yes.
And he was elected, but the assembly, the state assembly of Georgia, refused to seat him because he stood against the war in Vietnam.
My God.
Which by all accounts now is an unjust war. But Reverend, I'm 67 years old. I was I believe I was 20, 21 when the war in Vietnam ended. So I know a little bit about the war in Vietnam, and it's easy to be against the war now, but it wasn't easy when the war was going on.
Yeah.
You know, that is what Dr. King experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. King had stayed away from criticizing the war in Vietnam. But John Lewis, who went on from, like Julian Bond, from activist to congressperson, he opposed the war in Vietnam. In fact, he was the president of SNCC in 1963 when Dr. King led the March on Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the only young person allowed to speak at that march. There were only 12 speakers at the March on Washington in 1963. And John Lewis was the SNCC representative who was allowed to speak. But guess what happened to John Lewis? They said, John, you can't give this speech as it is, because SNCC had taken a stand against the war in Vietnam as early as 1963. And they actually edited John Lewis's speech to take out his criticism and opposition to the war in Vietnam. And you can actually go online and see the speech that John Lewis originally wrote and see the speech that he actually gave, and you can see how they changed it.
Wow.
But Dr. King's conscience was troubled by this, because a man of conscience, and this is what it means to be a man of conscience. A man of conscience is a troubled man. A woman of conscience is a troubled woman.
My God.
You know why? Because when you see injustice,
yes, sir,
your conscience will not let you turn your eyes away from injustice.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Your conscience will not let you go and sleep easy when you've seen injustice. And King was a man of justice, and King knew that SNCC was right. And it took King about 4 years. He came out against the war in Vietnam on April the 4th, 1967.
My Lord.
He gave that famous speech at Riverside Church. So Julian Bond also spoke out against the war in Vietnam. And the Georgia state legislature refused to seat him. So what did Julian Bond do? Julian Bond fought for his seat in the state legislature all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States.
Wow.
And the Supreme Court ruled in his favor.
Wow.
And said, you must seat this young man in the state legislature of Georgia. You know, Reverend Stoddart, I was blessed to have met Julian Bond. I met just about all of the civil rights leaders except Dr. Martin Luther King.
My Lord.
Because he was assassinated. He was assassinated in the spring of my freshman year when I was a student at Arts High School in Newark. But in 1971, and this is why I said 50 years, Reverend, Next month, March the 24th, will be my social justice birthday.
Wow.
Now, why do I say that? I have my birthday, the day in which I was born, my Earth Day, that I arrived here via my mother on the planet Earth. But I count as my social justice birthday the day that I took a stand for justice as March the 24th. Because in March the 24th, 1971, I led a walkout at my high school, Arts High School in Newark, New Jersey.
Wow.
We walked out to protest education conditions in our schools.
Mm.
I led the walkout, I led the march, and I led a sit-in at the Gateway Hotel in Newark. It's called the Doubletree now. It's that hotel right across the street from Penn Station. It's still there.
Yeah.
Doubletree Hotel now. I took 200 students in there and led a sit-in 1971. And as a result of that sit-in, Reverend, I was appointed to the Newark Board of Education on July 1st, 1971, at the age of 17 years old, the youngest person ever appointed to a board of education in the history of the United States. I wasn't even old enough to vote. And Reverend, I wasn't a student representative.
Wow.
I was a full vote, 9 members on the board.
Wow.
I was one of the 9 full voting board members appointed by Mayor Kenneth A. Gibson, who was the first Black mayor in the city of Newark.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of becoming the youngest member of a board of education, in July of 1971, I received a letter. Guess where it was from? The Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Wow.
Inviting me to receive an award, Youth Leadership Award, from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference at their conference in New Orleans, Louisiana in August.
Wow.
Guess who signed that letter?
John
Coretta Scott King.
Coretta Scott King. Wow.
The wife of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Wow.
And they brought me down there, Reverend, to New Orleans. And I received the award from the hands of Coretta Scott King, the wife of Martin Luther King.
Wow. Wow.
But guess who else I met when I was down there? I met Rosa Parks.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? I met Rosa Parks. Everybody know Rosa Parks, right? I met Rosa Parks.
Wow.
And not only did I meet Rosa Parks, when I returned from that convention, as a board member, I put forward a motion to change the name of Waverly Avenue School to Rosa Parks Elementary School.
Wow.
In fact, I put forward motions to rename a bunch of schools in Newark. We renamed South 8th Street School, Martin Luther King.
Wow.
We renamed South 10th Street School, Harriet Tubman. We renamed Waverly Avenue School, Rosa Parks. We renamed Southside High School, Malcolm X Shabazz High School.
Wow.
And in the North Ward, we renamed Abington Avenue School, Roberto Clemente School, who is a Black Puerto Rican baseball player.
Yes.
Who led a baseball strike to protest the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Wow.
That was all at the age of 17, Reverend.
Oh, goodness gracious.
I could have stopped right there. I could have threw in the towel right there. I said, my work is done. I threw in the towel, you know? But it just seems in my life that history has crisscrossed my life. And listen to this. Just today, I responded to a post on Facebook because someone was commemorating Jesse Owens. I don't know how many of our viewers know the name Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens was a famous Black athlete.
Sprinter.
Olympic athlete. In 1936, he was on the United States Olympic team at the Olympics in Berlin,
Germany.
And guess what was happening at that time?
Oh, yeah.
It was the buildup toward World War II. World War II hadn't started, but Hitler had come to power
Yeah.
in Germany. And Hitler was the head of the Nazi Party, which believed wholeheartedly and taught the theory of white supremacy. They called it Aryan supremacy because they believed the white race descended from a people called the Aryans in Upper Asia, Caucasian people. And, you know, Hitler said that the Germans were superior and would beat everybody at the Olympics. Well, they didn't know about Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens came there and won every race that he was in. And when he stood up on the Olympic stand where they have the gold, the silver, and the bronze, Hitler got up and walked out.
Wow.
But guess who else got up and walked out on Jesse Owens? Our president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Wow.
When the Olympic team returned to the United States, Roosevelt, who was seen as a good president, but you got to know the history.
Yeah.
Roosevelt invited the white athletes to the White House, but didn't invite the black athletes.
Really?
To the White House. And Jesse Owens said in his book that was quoted on Facebook yesterday, he said that he wasn't upset about Hitler. He was upset about Franklin Roosevelt and Truman, who followed Roosevelt, who did not recognize his achievements.
Wow.
So we had to fight in World War II. We had to fight against the racism of the Germans over there, and we had to fight against racism over here. Now, why do I tell that story? Because, and I'm going to get to slavery in a minute. Why do I tell that story? Because, Reverend, when I was a student at South 17th Street School, and before I knew anything about anything, I was in the 8th grade. And Reverend, I got thrown out of school. I was acting up pretty bad. I got thrown out because I did vandalism to the school. And I got thrown out and brought back in. My mother went to beg the principal almost on her hands and knees. My father died when I was 4. And, you know, I had to go back with my mother after being expelled. And I had to watch my mother cry and beg the principal, who was white, and his name happened to be King. His name was Mr. King.
Wow.
I had to watch my mother almost grovel to beg that man to let me graduate.
My God.
And that had a profound effect on me. So I had a teacher in the 8th grade, white teacher. Her name was Elizabeth Ryerson. And in the spring of 1967, that's when I graduated from South 17th Street School. Before I graduated in the spring, we were in class one day. And Miss Ryerson said, "Larry, I want you to come with me." I said, "Where are we going?" She said, "We're going downtown." I said, "I got to ask my mother." She said, "We don't have time to ask your mother." Now, if she'd have done that today, she might have lost her job. But she took me downtown Newark. And there's a big brown building in Newark on Market Street. It's a big brown building. It's one side is Market, one side is Washington, one side is Halsey, and one side is Bank Street.
Yeah.
That building used to be the Bamberger's department store.
Yeah.
Yes. Miss Ryerson took me there and took me upstairs. And upstairs is where they sold books, and there was a big commotion up there. And it was the first time I had ever seen TV cameras. You know, like the big one back in the day, it was real big, and they had the camera on their shoulders. And a man was sitting down, and they were interviewing this man. And my teacher went over to a table and got a book and went and paid for the book, then came back over to the man, to where the man was sitting. And the teacher, my teacher, Miss Ryerson, she had me in one hand, had the book in the other. And she said, "Sir, would you please sign this book for my students?" And he signed the book. Guess whose signature it was? Jesse Owens.
Jesse Owens.
Jesse Owens.
Wow.
I met Jesse Owens in the spring of 1967.
Wow.
And so I have met many of these people
Mm.
that have been in our history, even Louis Armstrong.
Wow.
Now people would say, well, Larry Hamm, what does Louis Armstrong have to do with Black history? I didn't know until recently, that he really was. I knew he was an important figure as a musician
Yeah.
and a pioneer with jazz.
Yeah. The jazz
But
band.
back in the day, Reverend, I don't
Yeah.
know if you can remember, because I think I'm actually older than you.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
My gray hair here, my gray hair. But people don't remember that back in the day, amusement parks used to be segregated.
Mm. Wow.
There's an episode from Dr. King in one of the movies, and Dr. King is speaking, and he said he came home one day and his daughter was watching TV, and she said, Daddy, can you take me to Funtown? And then Dr. King had to explain to his daughter that she couldn't go to Funtown because down there in Georgia, the amusement parks was segregated.
Segregated. Yep. Yep.
Now, people, when they think of segregation, they think it's only down south.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't just down south. It was up here in the north. In
Yes,
fact,
sir.
in Irvington, New Jersey, there used to be an amusement park called Olympic Park.
Mm-hmm.
And, on certain nights, they had colored night.
Mm.
Now that's up here in Irvington. That ain't even in South Jersey. That's right over here. I'm about 2 miles from Irvington. Colored nights.
My
So
God.
why do I raise that? In the 1960s, they opened up a park. I believe it was in the area of White Plains, New York, called Freedom Land.
Mm.
And Freedom Land's policy was to take everybody, Black or white, regardless of their race or ethnicity. So my mother took me on a bus ride because they had buses that you could get on from Penn Station that would take you to Freedom Land. And we went to Freedom Land, and in the middle of the day, they would always have a show. And guess who was at that show? Louis Armstrong.
Louis Armstrong.
Louis Armstrong. Satchmo. Remember Satchmo? Satchmo. And my mother took me up to him, and I had something, I guess I had the Freedom Land program or something, and he autographed. Now, why do I raise that? Because a lot of us think of Satchmo, we think of Louis Armstrong, and we think of music, and we really don't think of civil rights. But guess what somebody in the music industry told me recently? They said Satchmo gave a lot of money to the civil rights movement. Because when we went on the bus rides, the freedom rides, right?
Yeah.
Somebody had to pay for them.
Somebody had to pay.
Somebody had to pay for when we was in jail. Somebody had to pay to get us out.
Yeah.
Somebody had to pay the lawyers.
Yeah.
Having a movement costs money.
Yeah.
Satchmo was a big supporter behind the scenes. I have no recollection of him saying anything about civil rights. I'm sure he made some statements, but I don't have any recollection. But someone who is in the music industry said, yeah, was another big supporter that we would never think of? Sammy Davis Jr. Wow. Now, a lot of people remember Sammy Davis because there's this famous picture of Sammy Davis and Richard Nixon together, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And Sammy is laughing and backslapping and everything. And some people was calling Sammy and Uncle Tom.
Yeah.
But guess what? Amiri Baraka told me that Sammy Davis Jr. gave a lot of money to not just civil rights organizations, but to some of the Black militant organizations, including his own organization. So this is something, and I hope some young people are watching this program, because I want to say to the young people, because I'm guilty of it too. I ain't gonna make no criticisms that I have made of myself. We often judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
We think because somebody is not talking a certain talk or walking a certain walk that they're not in our corner.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, you'll never know who's in your corner until you discover it.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people who we don't think of as being activists were supporters of the civil rights movement. I met Harry Belafonte at the National Black Political Convention in 1972.
Wow.
You know, he was a big supporter, and to this day, he's still alive to this day.
Yes.
He's a big supporter of the freedom movement.
Yes, he was.
You know, many people over the years I have been able to meet. And this is why we have to talk about breaking the chains of slavery, because we've always had to fight against slavery. Now, there's all kind of slavery. There's the slavery, there's chattel slavery. And we had to fight against chattel slavery. You know, a lot of young people, the way they teach history in our schools, they don't teach the whole history. In the schools, the way they teach history now is really like they focus on some famous people or some famous historical figures. You know, like they'll focus on Frederick Douglass. And by the way, tomorrow is Frederick Douglass' birthday.
Yes.
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day.
Now, he didn't know that he was actually born on that day, but back in his time, they didn't always keep records of when we were born and when we died.
Mercy.
Some people had sense enough to write it down in the Bible. That's why to this day, with certain government agencies, if you can bring in a Bible and it's written in there, your birth date and everything, that can be used as an important document.
Yes.
But Frederick Douglass chose February 14th as his birthday.
Yeah.
Another famous figure.
Hey, Larry, hold on, Larry. Hey, Larry, hold on. Something happened. Your sound just got warped. Your sound just got warped a little bit. I don't know if something went on top of your mic or what.
Can you hear me now?
Still a little warped, but keep talking.
Okay. Is it clear enough?
You're coming through. Keep talking. Let's see if it gets back.
All right. So you know, they teach Black history in a certain way, and we really need to try to change that to tell our story as a people. Because I hear a lot of young people, as I go in schools and speak, like a lot of young people say, well, you're teaching me that we were slaves, but you're not teaching me that we fought back.
Yeah.
And we did fight back. In fact, there wasn't a stage of enslavement where there wasn't resistance. We resisted on the African continent. We resisted on the slave ships. We resisted on the shores of the Western Hemisphere, whether it was in the Caribbean and South America or here in North America, the United States. There's a book out now. I'm going to recommend some books to some people. And I hope you'll get this because I'm going to talk fast because I'm trying to stay within this 30-minute range here. But I would recommend to people Black History for Beginners. That's one book. And I'm recommending these because these books are illustrated. And these are books that the family can read to each other and that I believe will hold the children's interest as well. One is Black History for Beginners. Another one is Slavery for Beginners. And a third one is Reparations for Beginners. I would recommend all of those books. Those are what they call graphic novels, meaning that they're very well illustrated. And you know, when you're teaching children need pictures to hold their attention. So I recommend people get those books. But now some adult books that I would recommend when we're talking about the issue of slavery would be Capitalism and Slavery by Dr. Eric Williams. Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams is another book that I would recommend. Of course, the famous book on the Black experience in America is From Slavery to Freedom by Dr. John Hope Franklin. From Slavery to Freedom. Those are just a few. There are many books. on the experience. A more recent book would be Half the Story Has Never Been Told, which has a lot in there. But I want the young people to know that we did resist. We resisted from the point that the mid-Atlantic slave trade began, because that's the slave trade that brought us here. And we resisted until slavery ended with the Civil War. It's also important to understand that our experience is not just the slave experience, but it is also our pre-enslavement experience. Africa is the cradle of civilization. Africa is the birthplace of humanity. And one book that I would really recommend to people is They Came Before Columbus. They Came Before Columbus by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Ivan Van Sertima. I knew Dr. Van Sertima. He actually joined the People's Organization for Progress, to my surprise, about a year before he passed away. I was also fortunate enough to meet Dr. John Henry Clark, the great historian. I visited him at his home, and I would recommend all the books written by Dr. John Henry Clark. But we had great civilizations in Africa. You know, I took my daughter to open house night one night, Reverend, and went to the social studies class, and the social studies teacher was there. He was so proud because he was saying that he was teaching Black studies to his students, and all the parents were smiling because they were mostly Black, because we want our kids to know our history. And he says, this cycle I'm gonna teach this, and this cycle I'm gonna teach that. And then we'll conclude Black history. And then when Black history is over, we'll teach about Egypt. And I said, what? You know, I looked at the map. Anybody look at the map will see that Egypt is in Africa. And Egypt, ancient Egypt, that produced the pyramids and the Sphinx, that was a Black civilization.
Absolutely.
Black civilization. And one of the people who proved this beyond the shadow of a doubt was Sheikh Anta Diop. Sheikh Anta Diop. So I would recommend the books that are written by Sheikh Anta Diop on our history. Civilization and Barbarism by Sheikh Anta Diop, and others. But we had great civilizations in Africa. You know, people talk about the sciences. We helped birth the sciences. You look at those pyramids. The pyramids are the largest standing structures in the history of humanity. There were other things that have been built by other great civilizations, but most of them are gone, and the pyramids still stand. And we could spend 30 minutes just talking about these pyramids, but I'm gonna leave it right there and suffice it to say that we should also study our history before enslavement. We had great kingdoms. Some of these kingdoms are mentioned in the Bible. Cush is mentioned in the Bible. Libya is mentioned in the Bible. I think Nubia is mentioned in the Bible. Ethiopia is certainly mentioned in the Bible. Reverend, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of Moses' wives, I believe Zipporah, was mentioned as an Ethiopian. We had great civilizations. And I want people to know that when slavery started, we resisted, and the culmination of our resistance was the Civil War. Now, a lot of people know about the Civil War, but they don't know that it was Black soldiers that turned the tide of the Civil War. Lincoln was not winning. And, you know, the radicals in the Republican Party back then told Lincoln, Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass said, you need to let the Black man take up arms. And initially Lincoln was resistant, but he wasn't winning. So he issued the Emancipation Proclamation as a recruitment document. And 220,000 Black men.
Really?
Yes. Listen, Reverend.
Wow.
220,000 Black men responded to the Emancipation Proclamation and joined the Union Army. Now, let me just say this. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't free all Black people. It offered freedom to those people who were in the states, parishes, counties, that were in rebellion.
Yeah.
And if you could get
Really?
free, that's right. If you could get free and join the Union Army and you survive, you get your freedom. 220,000, Reverend.
Wow.
180,000 in the Union Army. And that's what turned the tide. And even in that racist period, Black soldiers distinguished themselves. You know, yesterday they gave a congressional medal to the Black police officer that protected the Senate. Did you hear about this? Goodman, I think his name is. And they gave him, but Reverend, during the Civil War, 36 Black soldiers received the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Wow.
From the Congress. We distinguished ourselves on the battlefield and we helped turn the tide of the Civil War. But you want to hear the irony of it, Reverend? That even in the Union Army, they paid the white soldiers one wage and the Black soldiers another wage.
My God.
And even when they died, Reverend, the Black, I'm talking about the Union soldiers now. I'm not talking about the Confederate.
No.
The Black Union soldiers and the white Union soldiers couldn't be buried in the same cemetery.
You got to be kidding me.
Reverend, right here in New Jersey is a cemetery called the African Cemetery. It's in a little town, I can't think of, Pennington, Reverend. The African Cemetery is in Pennington, New Jersey. It's between Trenton and Princeton. And Reverend, the Black people in Pennington, after the Civil War, put their little pennies together and they bought a plot of land in Pennington, and they named it. This is the name they gave it, the African Cemetery. The Black people in the 19th century were not confused about our identity.
Wow.
Because we are an African people.
Yeah.
We are the sons and daughters of Africa.
Yes,
Today,
sir.
we might have different nationalities. I might be from the U.S. Someone else might be from Jamaica. Somebody else from Trinidad. Somebody else from Guyana. You know, we're African people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reverend, I went to the African cemetery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the Black Civil War soldiers were buried. And you know, want to hear something, Reverend? I was looking at the headstones. And I said to the ladies, because some Black women are the caretakers of that cemetery. I said to the ladies, I said, why are there so many soldiers in here that were part of divisions from Connecticut and from Pennsylvania? Guess what they told me, Reverend? Black men in New Jersey could not enlist in the Union Army.
Wow.
They had to go to Connecticut and they had to go to Pennsylvania to join regiments. You think of slavery. Slavery was here, Reverend, in New Jersey.
In New Jersey.
Yes. In New Jersey. Reverend, New Jersey was the last northern state to abolish slavery.
Oh, my goodness.
And only abolished it by way of the 13th Amendment. Reverend, when the 13th Amendment was passed, there were 36 states in the U.S. at that time. You needed 27 to amend the Constitution. New Jersey was not among the 27 states that ratified the 13th Amendment.
Wow. Wow.
Reverend, this was a slave, and it was part of the Union. See, this is why we got to study history, because your eyes will be open. You'll begin to understand why we're fighting, why white supremacists marched on, seized, occupied the Capitol, and marched through there with Confederate flags. Unless you understand history, you can't understand why that's going on and still going on today.
My God. My God.
Slavery was here, Reverend.
Mm.
In 1860, the census said that there were nearly 14,000 registered slaves in New Jersey.
In New Jersey, 1860.
Yes, Reverend, the most active slave port outside of the South. I mean, the most active slave port on the East Coast wasn't even in the South. It was New York City. Wall Street is where the auction block was. That's where the money was being made, at the
Wow.
auction block.
Wow.
Wall Street is the auction block is the ancestor of Wall Street.
Wow.
Reverend, guess where the most active slave port after that was? Perth Amboy, New Jersey.
Oh, you got to be kidding me.
And guess where the most active slave port was after that? Camden, New Jersey. Because the Delaware River was a deep river, and the slave ships could come up in there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then slaves would be purchased in Jersey, in Delaware, even in Pennsylvania. Reverend, all of these states had slavery.
Mm.
Even while they were fighting the Civil War, they had slavery.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Now, the North, there was more sympathy for abolition in the North, but there was slavery up here nonetheless.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And the irony is that when Black and white soldiers could die together on the battlefield, but they couldn't even be buried in the same
My
cemetery.
God, my God, my God.
We defeated the South, but we did not defeat white supremacy.
Wow, wow.
And we broke the chains of slavery by force of arms. That's what it took. Reverend, do you know that more people died in the Civil War, more Americans?
Yes.
More Americans died in the Civil War than Americans that died in World Wars I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam combined.
My God, that is scary.
Almost 1 million.
Yes.
That's what it took. And that's why we still fighting today. Reverend, if you look at these states that voted for Donald Trump and you look at the states that voted for Biden, it almost breaks down just the way it broke down between the Union and the Confederacy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right.
So for a minute, we had a little democracy.
Yeah.
And W.E.B. Du Bois wrote a book that I recommend called Black Reconstruction. I recommend everybody read Du Bois's Black Reconstruction. Also read Du Bois's Suppression of the West African Slave Trade. That'll give you more insight on slavery. But the Reconstruction period, for a minute, you know, we had rights for about 10 years, and then we had the Compromise of 1877, just like what happened with Hillary Clinton and Trump. One won the popular vote and one won the electoral vote. So the Democrats and the Republicans made a deal. They said, okay, Republicans, you can have the White House, but you got to take the troops out of the South. Because after the Civil War, the troops had to stay in the South to protect Black people.
Yeah.
So the deal in 1877, they took them out. And then what happened? The Black Codes. And then what happened? Jim Crow segregation.
Jim Crow.
Codified in law, Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896. So the next Civil War was the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement was a nonviolent civil war.
Yeah.
To get the rights back that had been taken from us during Reconstruction.
Wow. Wow.
And we made progress.
Yeah.
And then 1968, Nixon is elected. We went to sleep. And then they've been rolling back our rights, and not just our right, but the rights of Black people, working people, poor people, all people.
Yeah.
Since 1968. And here we are today.
Here we are today.
So we broke the physical chains of slavery. But now we must break the symbolic chains of slavery, the political and economic chains of slavery.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that's why we're here. That's why we're here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm going to stop right here and maybe you have some questions.
Well, hey, listen.
too long.
Well, first of all, when you said less than a half an hour, I knew that wasn't going to happen. So let's be clear. I knew. I said, I want to see that. I want to see that happen. Let me see Larry Hamm talk for less than, because you're walking Black encyclopedia with knowledge that most of us don't know, have not been privy to. And I want to thank you so much, Larry. I don't know our moderators behind the scene. Avril, I don't know if you have any questions that have come in for Larry that you'd like to read off for us, but we surely would love to get some questions thrown at him if any questions have come in. And if nobody has any questions, I surely would have some questions for him.
Yes.
So Avril, do we have any questions?
Just the question on how, thank you so much, Larry Hamm, we appreciate you.
Thank you.
We have, what do you recommend as the best approach to help, white people, friends, those around us to better understand Black history, especially in the workplace?
Well, there's several things. First of all, everybody, Black and white, but since this question was asked about white people in particular, everybody, Black and white, we need to study Black history. Now, the state legislature of New Jersey in 2002 passed a law called the Amistad Act. And the Amistad Act has mandated that Black history be taught in all social studies curriculum, elementary, middle school, and high school in every public school district in the state. Now, I don't know how many people know this. There are 600 public school districts in the state of New Jersey. In this little bitty state, we got 600 school districts. And that has a lot to do with racial segregation. Now, guess how many of the 600 school districts have implemented the Amistad Act? Maybe 12 out of 600. And even though it's the law, people have resisted implementing it. So one thing all people, Black and white, should do is go into your local school and ask the principal to see the Amistad curriculum, because every school is supposed to have a curriculum. The principal should be able to show you the curriculum that they're using for Black history. If they don't have it, parents should demand it. Now, that's what we should do for our young people. But older people need to read. We tell our kids to read, but we need to read. That's one of the reasons we can't answer a lot of the questions they ask us, because after we get out of school, we start studying, we start reading. But here's the good news. We have so many resources available to us. I mean, with my phone, I could go and look up 1,000 YouTube videos on Black history. Even if you don't read, there's no excuse, because you can see all kind of videos and movies on YouTube on Black history. And not just on YouTube, on a lot of the social media and on the internet. So we all should read. We should read the books I recommended today. We should read, we should watch and listen to media, electronic media, video, visual media, and audio visual media, and we should have discussions with people. We have to self-educate, educate ourselves and stay current, and we need to stay current, because current events teaches Black history.
Let me ask you this, Larry, as Avril is getting ready to maybe tee up the next question.
Mm-hmm.
What was going through your head on the 6th of January as you watched the mayhem down at the Capitol building? What was going through your head in light of Black history? What were you thinking?
Well, first of all, Reverend, the first thing that went through my mind is, I told you so. Because, Reverend, the attempted coup, the insurrection and attempted coup on January 6th they were talking about it for months.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you don't know what the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and the Boogaloo Boys and the Three Percenters were doing, if you listen to the first presidential debate, you should have known something was up when they asked Donald Trump, President Trump, will you commit to a peaceful transfer of power in the United States? He did not answer that question affirmatively. I knew then that something was up, but we have organizations that were monitoring. And I was telling people, I was like, you know, there may be some type of attempt to take over the government. Trump will not walk away from this thing.
Yeah.
And then over these months, you began to see he sued 60 lawsuits, all of them failed. He tried to get states to change their electors. He did all kinds of things. And then when all the legal things failed, they went to violence. That thing was planned, Reverend.
Yeah.
And you know what I thought about? I thought about Black Wall Street, where they burned down. You know, they tell us, well, build up your own community. Well, we built our own business and y'all burnt them down. I thought of the white supremacist coup in Wilmington, Delaware, at the beginning of the 20th century. I thought of Rosewood. But here's the difference, because the 21st century requires multidimensional thinking.
Yeah.
Things can happen for a multiplicity of reasons.
Yes.
Like the Klan marched in Washington, D.C. many times. The Klan was welcome. Woodrow Wilson was from New Jersey. He was the governor of New Jersey. Before he was governor of New Jersey, he was the president of Princeton University. Woodrow Wilson was a member of the Ku Klux Klan.
Wow.
Woodrow Wilson had the first showing of that racist film, Birth of a Nation, in the White House.
Wow.
Mandated that his staff watch the film. The workforce in Washington had been integrated. It was Woodrow Wilson that resegregated the workforce. He actually ordered screens to be put up in offices to divide the white and the black workers. So the government and the Klan were working hand in hand. But this time, the Klan, the neo-Nazis, the Boogaloo Boys, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, and a host of other neo-Nazi organizations of all types, they attacked the government. That's the big difference about what happened this time. And then, you know, when I was looking at it live as it was happening, I was saying, well, wait a minute. When we go down there to protest, we're met with rubber bullets and real bullets. Police on horseback. Stun guns. Tasers. Beatings. And I was like, you know.
And that's with never threatening to take over the Capitol building. That's just a regular protest. These guys were online threatening to take over the government, threatening to undo the election, and they were unprepared.
That's right. And Reverend, I think they were unprepared for a reason. I think there was a whole lot of collusion. I'm calling for a congressional investigation on the level of the investigation of the bombing of the World Trade Center, and criminal prosecution.
Yes, there should be.
Yes. So what's the next question?
Any questions? Any other questions?
Yes. There's a two-part question here. What prevents us from creating our own banks, and is the credit bureau a racist system?
Nothing prevents us from creating our own banks. We have created our own banks. We are creating banks, and we'll probably create banks in the future. There's nothing that prevents us except lack of capital. To have a bank, you have to have capital to open a bank. And people are also opening credit unions. which in some instances are better than a bank, can give you more reasonable terms than a bank would give you. So nothing but lack of will and capital prevent us from opening banks. So if people have the will and they can pool the resources and get the capital, they can open a bank. You know, we used to have a black bank in Newark. It was City National Bank. It remained a black bank for, I think, probably close to 30 years, maybe even 40 years. I knew Charles Wiggum personally. He had started a funeral business, Wiggum's Funeral Homes. And Mr. Wiggum, who was the owner of Wiggum's Funeral Home, pulled together enough capital and he opened City National Bank. And it was a black bank for maybe 40 years. And more recently, it was sold out to non-black buyers. So it's no longer a black-owned bank. I think there are blacks that have ownership in it, but I don't think they hold the majority of shares in the bank at this time.
Any more, Avril?
Yes, there's one more question I can see right now. What can we do as Black Christians to overcome our own mental slavery besides studying Black history? Because we study our history, but still don't know how to work together.
Well, Reverend, I'm gonna let you come. I'm gonna say something, but I'm gonna let you answer this too. I think you have expertise on this. Let me say this. I know that a lot of people, well, let me put it another way. I recognize that we have problems working together. But I want to tell you something. All people have problems working together.
Yeah.
This is not just something endemic to Black people.
Mm-hmm.
Black people, I know we have a lot of problems, poverty, crime, et cetera, but I want to tell you tonight that we are a great people. We wouldn't even be here today had we not known how to work together. How you think we got out of slavery? Do you know how much working together it took to get us out of slavery?
My Lord.
Slavery was the economy. This country was built on slavery.
Yeah.
It was built on two things: stolen land and stolen labor. The theft of the land of the indigenous people and the theft of the labor of the African people.
My Lord.
In 1860, the largest form of capital investment in the United States, larger than the investment in both banking and industrial capital, was the capital invested in slavery.
My Lord.
Slavery was the base of this economy. That's why it took a war to end it. My God. It took a war to end slavery. Let me tell you, people knew that slavery was wrong from the beginning. The Quakers, there are many Christian denominations in the United States, but the Quakers were the first people as a denomination to come out against slavery. They issued the first anti-slavery tract that is a tract written document in 1625. My God. Wow. We got here in 1619 in the US. 1625, they were on the record. No other denomination except the AMEs officially came out against slavery. And you can check me. You can go back and check that. And when I come back next year, you can tell me if I was right or wrong. But as I understand it, no other denomination as an entire denomination. Now, there were churches that individually came out. And there were religious leaders that came out. But you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. You have your annual conference, your synod, you know, your gatherings where you make official policy for the denomination. When the Civil War went down, none of the major denominations had come out against slavery. Wow. People knew it was wrong.
They did, Larry. They
but
did.
we worked together. You know how many slave rebellions there were? Herbert Apteker, read his book, Slave Rebellions in Colonial America. 400.
What's the name of the book?
Slave Rebellions in Colonial America by Herbert Apteker. Apteker says that there were 400 recorded slave rebellions. None of the rebellions succeeded, but had we not rebelled, no one would have affirmed our humanity. It was in our rebellion that our humanity was affirmed and gave rise to the abolitionist movement. What was the greatest slave rebellion? The liberation of Haiti by Toussaint, Dessalines, Boukman. The Haitian look, Black people in America owe a tremendous debt because it was because of the Haitian Revolution, which the first and only slave rebellion that resulted in the formation of a republic. When I was a little boy, I don't know if you remember the movie Reverend Spartacus. You remember Spartacus?
Yeah.
With Kirk Douglas?
Kirk Douglas, Spartacus.
Yes. When I saw Spartacus, my mother was a seamstress. When I saw Spartacus, I went and got some of her material and I cut out a hole in it and I put the material over and tied a rope around it. I'm Spartacus. Spartacus was actually based on a true story.
Yes.
Roman, they were called the Servile Wars. There were slave rebellions in the Roman Republic. Spartacus was a real figure. His rebellion failed. The Romans killed him and all his men. In fact, they crucified them.
My Lord.
They put them on crosses that went for miles along the Appian Way. Black people are the only people that led a successful slave rebellion where the people actually got their freedom and they created a new nation. After the revolution in Haiti, the British abolished the international slave trade in response to the Haitian Revolution, and the abolition movement took off after the Haitian Revolution. So what I'm trying to say is that we couldn't have abolished slavery had we not worked together. We could not have abolished Jim Crow had we not worked together. We could not have gone from 425 Black elected officials in 1965 to over 10,000 Black elected officials in 1972. That was the Black Power movement. Had we not worked together. We do know how to work together. Now there are problems, but we should not think that somehow there's something in us. It's hard for people to work together, and we have to find ways to continue to work together so that we can continue to progress. What do you think, Reverend?
I think a part of the challenge that we face in terms of being able to get to the next level is to retraining our minds. There's a huge, I'm writing on that now, there's a huge thing that is being talked about now they talk about neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is a powerful tool to retrain your thinking. Two doctors wrote a book called Words Can Change Your Brain. And I think that it is important that we balance retelling our history with redreaming our future.
There you go.
I think that's a very important piece of what we need to do, because the truth is that unless and until the vast majority of us begin to retrain our brain and help our children to retrain their brain, then we'll keep repeating some of the same poverty-driven decisions and actions that keep us down and hold us back. And you should know, Larry, that I'm very actively involved in Newark now as a community healthcare chaplain. So I'm dealing with people every day in Newark, the disenfranchised, the marginalized, and it's hard work to bring somebody who's been living in public housing their entire lives.
Yes.
Their mama lived in public housing.
Yes.
It's hard to bring them up from there to see a new light, to dream a new dream.
Yes.
And that takes a deliberate, intentional process of retooling my outlook. And you can't do that by yourself unless somebody comes alongside you and helps to coach you up and build you up and help pull you up and pull you forward. That's how I see it.
I agree with you 100%, Reverend. And brothers and sisters, you know, the mind is like a sponge.
Yeah.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
You got to elevate your mind. You got to listen to positivity. If you listening to music all day long that's talking about nigga this and nigga that, and excuse me, Reverend, bitch this and bitch that, that's gonna enslave you. That's another form of slavery.
Yes, sir.
You know, if you're watching stupidity on television all day and all night long, you got to elevate yourself. Reverend, I don't own a television.
Wow. That's a statement right there.
Reverend, I haven't owned a television since 2014.
Wow.
Now, I'm not saying everybody has to be like me, but what I'm saying is that I know that my mind is more powerful today because of that. Now, I watch stuff on my computer, but I'm watching programs that are discussing the issues of the day, the challenges that face us as a people, our history, our politics, our economics. You know, you got to raise yourself up. You have to educate yourself. You have to want to break the mental chains of slavery.
Absolutely.
You know, what did Steve Biko say? Steve Biko, who was an activist in South Africa, said, said, the mind of the Black man in the hands of the oppressor is his most powerful weapon.
Yes, sir. That's it right there. I
would recommend everybody read Dr. Carter G. Woodson's book, The Miseducation of the Negro.
Yeah.
You got to read that, people.
Yeah.
Carter G. Woodson is the father of Black History Month. He wrote that book, I think, in 1926. When you read The Miseducation of the Negro, you think he's talking about today. He said, if you train a man to go through the back door, because back in the day we had to come in the back door.
Yeah.
He said, if there is no back door, he'll make a back door.
Wow, my Lord, Lord have mercy.
We got to liberate our minds, and you liberate your mind through study, through positive and inspiring information.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how you liberate yourself, and you got to do it. And it's so important that we do it with our children. One thing I will say to parents, if you have small children, read to your children at night. Now, Reverend, when I was coming up, I was born in 1953. I lived on Ridgewood Avenue, number 5 Ridgewood Avenue. I lived next to a bar, the Ridgewood Bar on the corner of Ridgewood and Avon. The only books I had was the books that my mother bought books, but guess what the books were? They were the books that you could buy in the supermarket. And if you go in the supermarket aisle to where they keep books and magazines, they still sell them. They call it the Little Golden Library. You ever see these little books, the books of fairy tales and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Reverend, in 1957, when I was 4 years old, the only Black book I had at home was Little Black Sambo, and I had one.
Wow.
I had a copy of Little Black Sambo.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have that excuse today.
No, we don't.
There are so many Black children's books.
Mm-hmm.
You should know, when my daughters were born, Laini, Imani, and Nia,
Mm-hmm.
they all have African names.
Yeah.
I read to my children every night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any other question?
No, I'll say this, Larry, and I'll wrap it up here by saying this. I think every denomination has had their struggle. Our denomination, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we've had our struggle. Born right around the time, right before the Civil War. In our church, we had a woman we believe was inspired and insightful, woman named Ellen White. She had what we believe was a prophetic gift. And she wrote a book called The Southern Works. And she was so insightful about slavery and the evils of slavery. And she talked about, in vision, she talked about the battles where, like Chancellorsville, where it seemed like the North was about to win. And she talked about the angel of God empowering the South to win until the North made the decision to write the Emancipation Proclamation. And she said, she talks about the fact that once the government, Lincoln, pronounced the Emancipation Proclamation, that the angels of God began fighting on the side of the North to overcome the South.
Wow.
So of course,
you're teaching me something now.
of course, the Seventh-day Adventist Church was born in the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s. So we were coming into existence right around that time. Yes. So our denomination formalized more like 1860, 1863, thereabouts. And so we were not a long-standing entity during that time, but the prophetess, the anointed prophetess of God, began writing about slavery and the evils of slavery. As a matter of fact, her son, Edson White, built a boat called the Morning Star that sailed down the Mississippi post-slavery to teach Black children to read and write. So kids would come off of land onto the boat. And down in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and they would learn to read and write on the Seventh-day Adventist boat known as the Morning Star. Wow! And you should know that we have a Black a college down in Huntsville, Alabama, Oakwood University, that Ellen White was inspired by God to buy the land to teach the children of ex-slaves. Wow! So that's what Oakwood University is, a HBCU today. But she was instrumental in the purchase and establishment of Oakwood University as a HBCU to teach the children of slaves. That's and Oakwood University has produced, right now, Senate Chaplain Barry Black, the first African-American to serve as the chaplain in the United States Senate. He's a graduate.
I heard him today. I heard him give the opening prayer today.
You hear him give the opening prayer every day. That's an Oakwood graduate.
All right.
That's an Oakwood graduate. So, all right. So Oakwood has produced many doctors, many world leaders, many artists. Take Six, the gospel group Take Six, all graduates of Oakwood University. Wow. So Oakwood has, and that goes back again to the legacy of Ellen White. Now, it's not saying our church and our denomination has it all together. We still deal with racism right now, as all denominations do. But we continue to fight the good fight. And we are clear that the work is not yet done. Larry, man, I really appreciate you coming on today. You are a walking encyclopedia. You have educated us. You have inspired us.
Reverend, I'm just a street corner agitator.
Street corner agitator. I gotta find my way to Pennington, to the African Cemetery.
Yes.
African Cemetery in Pennington, New Jersey.
Yes.
And thank you for your time, Larry. Thank you for your energy. And we will make this an annual pilgrimage, my brother.
All right, brother. Thank you
so much. And rest assured that when you call me to come stand with you to march for justice, to march for righteousness, we're going to stand together because as I said before, and I keep reminding people, that's where Jesus would be with the
Yes, sir.
street corner agitator, because he was a street corner
Yes,
agitator
sir.
himself.
Yes, sir.
So you're in
Yes,
good company, brother.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend.
God bless you, Larry. Let me pray
Thank
for
you.
you before I let you go, if
Thank
that's
you.
all right.
Yes, yes.
All right, let's pray. Father God in heaven, thank you so much for this time to interview and talk with our friend and brother Larry Hamm, Lord. And I thank you for his journey. I thank you for his experience, his exposure. He's a living, breathing, walking demonstration of the struggle for freedom. He's a civil rights leader, an activist, a man who stood with those who went on before him, and they passed the torch to him, and he runs now his leg of the race. I pray, God, that he will not become weary in well-doing, that none of us will become weary in well-doing. Yes, we get discouraged. Yes, we get frustrated. But Lord, may we remember that even if we inch the ladder of progress one step forward, we have done our part. Help us to be faithful in our lane, to be faithful to our charge. And no matter come hell or high water, that we will not give up. We will not quit. We will not throw in the towel, because the battle is not over yet until you come. And ultimately, your divine justice will flow down like mighty rivers and will overshadow us and overcome us like powerful streams. Thank you, Lord God, for this time together. Thank you for the reminders that Larry brought us, and help us to continue to grow, to study, to read, in order that we might be our best selves. In your mighty name we pray. Amen and amen.
Amen.
I speak life over you, my brother. Keep doing what you're doing. Love you much.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend. Peace.
Peace and love.
All right.
Amen.